So, okay, learning objectives for today is learning how to manage that proposal timeline with the PIs, the COIs, and RMG as you're kind of bringing it home and getting it all packaged and ready to send to the sponsor. We're going to talk about how to determine when documents need PI revision and when they might be unallowable, and you need to let the PI know that. We're going to talk about how to obtain final documents under tight timelines. And actually, that's one of our breakout discussions, is kind of discussing like how do you get that hard to obtain document and make sure that it doesn't hold up the whole proposal. Just the nuts and bolts of getting the PI that final compiled proposal for review. And then, as I mentioned before, the key differences between federal nonprofit and clinical trial and contract proposals. And we'll be handing it over to Erin Romer and Sarah Dottie for that discussion. Okay, so for the proposal timeline, we talked about making a proposal document checklist, and that's what I use to track document status, because, the PI is probably going to send you a few documents at a time, and you need to keep track of it, because at some point the PI is going to say, okay, what do I have left? And so you need to be able to have that reference document. And this is especially true because sometimes, because you need to keep the PI updated on which documents are final and which need revision and which have yet to be provided. A lot of times the PI will say, well, I sent you my vertebrate animals. And I'll say, yes, but it had 5 sections and NIH has changed their guidelines and only wants 3. So I actually need a revised version. We're not done yet. And so keeping track of all that is really going to help facilitate the process. Notify the PI of any challenges that you're having with getting those documents from your co-investigators, your subaward site, or consultants. Obviously, we want to be resourceful and think of all of our options and before we reach that point. So again, we'll talk about that more in breakouts, but just being aware if there are any bottleneck documents that you need to be paying particular attention to. We talked about this in the budget segment last week, but I think it bears repeating. Finalize those budget documents early enough so that your RPM can actually get them into the sponsor portal. They're going to go in and type that in screen by screen. And as Margie mentioned in the first session, each RPM has between 10 and 15 proposals going at one time. So don't assume that they can drop everything and put your budget in the deadline. Give them some time. And then also related to that, keep the RPM updated on your proposal status, including when the final draft is going to be coming. As you're corresponding back and forth about the budget, just let them know. We're about 3/4 of the way done. The PI said they're sending the final documents on X day, and we plan to get it to you a day after that. Just something so they have an idea, and that'll help them manage the workflow and make sure that they have the time to dedicate to doing that really solid internal review that we want from them. They see so many proposals. They see so many more than we do. Giving them time to give us feedback on that is going to be helpful to us and to the PI. All right, so when you're getting those documents from the PI, what are you looking for? Well, some of the stuff we've talked about when we created our checklist, we have to be careful about the font type. We remember the horror story of the PI and his lucky fonts that was not allowed by the sponsor and the whole proposal got disallowed. This stuff does matter. Make sure your font size is at the minimum or greater than that. Again, the reason for that is it's not fair. If you have a 6-page limit and one person's using 8-point and the other person's using 12, then obviously the person using 8-point got more science into their proposal. That's not fair for peer review. So it has to be a certain size. Color, just make sure that it's legible. NIH actually does not say that you can't use colored type, but obviously it needs to be legible, easily read by reviewers. So the recommendation is keep it simple, keep it black when possible. Check the margins, your 1/2-inch margins are typical, but check your sponsor guidelines. And then also the figures, just make sure those figures are also within the 1/2-inch margins, and that whenever they have those legends, those little captions at the bottom, that they can be a little bit smaller type, but make sure it's still legible. And I have had RPMs come back and say, this legend does not look legible, have the PI revised. So it is something that we look at. Confirm that it's within the page limits. Again, we've scrutinized that funding opportunity announcement. We know the page limit for each document, and we want to confirm that it's within that page limit before we upload it. For NIH, remove any headers and footers. The assist system will add headers and footers itself. So anything you put there is just going to be written over by by that system. So don't do that. And then URLs, the only hyperlink allowed in any part of an NIH proposal is the link to the full bibliography in the investigator's bio sketch. And again, the reason for that is somebody can put something in a hyperlink that circumvents the page limitations, that puts more science out there. And another reason NIH doesn't like to do it is because if you happen to own that website, and the reviewer clicks on it, then you can look and see where that reviewer was sitting, and you can kind of, it affects confidentiality of the review process. So there are multiple reasons NIH doesn't like them. And again, your RPM will actually do a control F for HTTP inside your proposal, and tell you to remove anything except on those biosketches. So just preemptively do that before they have to do it and get those URLs removed. Review your document against your proposal checklist. You know, we talk about the subdivisions, you know, significance, innovation, and approach under your research strategy. Make sure that it is conforming to that. Sometimes guidelines do change, or sometimes a PI will recycle a document. It was from an NIH proposal, and now they're going to submit it to American Cancer Society, and they keep the subheadings from NIH and they don't match what American Cancer Society wants. And so these are the kinds of things you want to point out to the PI. Determine if a document is not needed or allowable. A great example is appendix items. I know a lot of PIs like to try to put things in the appendix, but very limited material is allowed. And you can find, you know, just like I've been saying many times, you can just use Google to say, you know, NIH appendix items, and you'll get the policies, the first results when you do that Google search. And it says allowable appendix materials, blank data collection forms, simple lists of interview questions, and blank informed consent forms. I want to emphasize the word blank. I worked with an investigator who put in a questionnaire, a data collection form, a survey form essentially, that had an explanatory paragraph at the top, and the entire proposal was withdrawn because it had more than just the blank questionnaire. So again, it may seem like I'm nitpicking, but this stuff really matters, and it can affect whether the proposal is reviewed or not. So we do want to get down into these little details. Review the biosketch. We did that earlier in the class, so I won't go over that again. But again, you just biosketches are something where we can make a big contribution because the details are there on the NIH guidelines, and the PIs really appreciate us doing that fine, detailed review. And then if any documents need revision or removal, this is the point at which you contact them and ask them how they'd like to proceed. You know, we are not scientists. We cannot make the revisions ourselves, but we can point out where they are and ask them what they'd like to do. Okay, so then, okay, now you've gotten everything uploaded. You've gotten everything back from the PI and the co-Is. And then now it's time to actually show the PI the final finished product. And we want to do that. We want to show them in the system. So, you know, for instance, you know, in Proposal Central, I have this proposal. We can take a look at, actually, I think it's in the CFF system that I want to show you guys. Yeah. When you open up one of these proposals, there's usually a place in the portal that'll just say application full print, and you can see it right here. And when you go into application full print, it's going to do a PDF of the entire document. And you guys, if you were here for the Q&A last week, when Ben from the RAC talked about putting something into PDF and how sometimes it'll look different when you see it in PDF from how you saw it in Word. And same thing's true for the PI. Send that PDF to them and they will probably see things that they need to revise that they would not have seen otherwise. So yeah, you can just click an application full print like this. There's the preview application feature in Assist and NIH as well. So those options are there. So I send that PDF, and I always make sure that I put in the email anything at all that you want to change is totally fine, because sometimes they say, I'm so sorry, I have to change these 5 documents. I'm not sorry at all. Really happy to catch these things now before it goes over to RMG, before it goes to the sponsor, and we end up in a situation where we have to withdraw and resubmit. So make any revisions to PI requests, keep sending revised PDF as many times as it takes. And then once the PI approves the full PDF, notify the RPM that it's ready for their review. And then you're going to get a list of feedback from the RPM. That person's going to, you know, again, has seen many proposals and knows the institutional requirements, and will let you know what you need to change from there. And then you can do the same process. You know, I always just forward that email to the PI and I say, I'm going to do these things. I need you to, you know, please let me know about these other scientific areas. And together we work together, and then we put together the revision. I send the PDF again, and then once the PI is happy, you notify the RPM, we're ready. Go ahead and press the submit button, you're done. And then the RPM will confirm that there are no electronic errors or warnings, and then it's in for review, and now all you can do is wait. So, okay, and so then I do want to mention a few resources we do have in our training materials. Again, training materials, pre-award management, proposal document format, preparation and formatting. There are reference documents in here. There are templates. And I want to point out, especially RMG has provided an extensive list of document templates and proposal checklists. The link is here. You can also use Google. The Stanford Research Development Office has template library as well. National Institute on Allergy and Infectious Diseases has a library of sample proposals. There are fellowship proposal resources. There's a lot of information out there so that you can use to help your PI finalize documents, to help with as you're reviewing them. What does a final submitted application look like compared to the PDF that I just printed? You can go to NIAID website and see that kind of thing. So there are resources in our RAC training